Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline.
Hello everyone, Existential Crisis Hotline, and tonight we're going to be going deep. Oh man, I spent a little bit of time today preparing. If you're in the chat, let me know, say hi, and man, we're going to get started, but just kind of thinking about what I should start with. I've got like 40 tabs open on my browsers. I got 2 browsers open, so you know we're serious tonight. Let me know if you can hear me. I'm assuming you can. And okay, so let me just give you an overview of what I'm thinking about. So last stream we ended, I was talking about going into last night we talked about reincarnation, the reincarnation trap. We kind of went into some of that. I was reading out of some of Jason Giorgiani's first book, and just kind of trying to open up the point that it's easy to dismiss certain things outside of let's call it the mainstream. It's easy to dismiss them offhand, but you really have to consider how much of the way you think has been conditioned by the system that we live in, a system which we know is hierarchical in nature, and that we know seeks to protect that hierarchy. So you really have to question everything. And that doesn't mean that just because something is outside of the mainstream, therefore it is true. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. But I always like to find those things that we're not supposed to know, or not supposed to talk about, or not supposed to agree with, and at least investigate them, and then find out what is really actually good about them that I can take. And if I find things that are not in alignment with my principles, then I can discard that. I can leave that. But we talked about this point that you really have to test things within your own experience. And that doesn't mean that just because you experience something equals that it's valid, because if you haven't very carefully gone through all of the information within yourself, meaning all of your presuppositions, all of your axioms, all of your assumptions, and actually checked them, then you have to realize you're bringing those with you in even evaluating your own experience. So when I say you have to be honest with yourself about your experience, that means firstly you have to check your assumptions. You have to also check, am I interpreting my experience based on how I would like it to be? Or am I understanding my experience in a way that I can actually test and see, is this real or not? Is there actual value in this within considering what's best for all? So it's a lot. You have to look at life as a creative process, as a creative experiment, like creating yourself. Not literally from scratch, because there's a lot of things that you don't have any real ability to change, like at least in this moment or this lifetime, like the physical structure of your body. But you might be surprised that there's a lot more to your body and what you're capable of than you realized if you were able to let go of certain assumptions. But again, you have to be honest with yourself. And we talked on previous streams, we talked about things like schizophrenia and other delusional type experiences that people have. So it is possible to lie to yourself. It is possible to want something to be true, right? Like you hear a voice in your head and it's God talking to you, or it's an angel, or it's the president beaming into your mind, whatever. why do you want the things that you're being told to be true, right? Does it make you feel special? Does it make you feel safe, secure? Or does it support you to actually take more responsibility for the reality that you live in? So that's really the starting point within all of this stuff that we go through. And I think I'll start with, playing a clip of another Jason Giorgiani video. I really like his stuff because he's very careful and methodical, especially in his writing. But he thinks very similar to how I think, in the sense of not necessarily coming to the same conclusions, but just the very not discarding something offhand just because you don't like it, but also not accepting something just because you like it. Like really pushing to see like, where does this go and what does it imply and can it be tested? So he just has a really cool perspective on a lot of points, and specifically the points around God. He just does a really great job of articulating some of the things that I've said over many decades of my own life and just talking to people and so forth, but he's really good at condensing it in a very effective way. So I'm going to play a little bit of that first, and then, man, I got a lot of stuff to go through. So it's going to be fun. I see, Sandra, you're in there. You got some snacks. That's cool. What kind of snacks you got? I'm going to guess... I'm going to guess some homemade cheese. Is that what you're eating? Or is it popcorn? All right. Let me switch the screen over here. Okay, yeah, I got the right one up. All right, cool. So firstly, I want to go into some points with Giorgiani, just talking about the concept of God, the concept of monism, the concept of the oneness of all reality as some kind of supreme being. He's got some really cool points. I want to talk about UFOs. And I'll probably explain more of this as we go, but I really think that we're on the verge of some kind of thing, maybe just like an agenda or just like some kind of propaganda being pushed, because like 9/11 was a really big event, obviously. Like for those who were alive when it happened, you could see how things changed in response to that. And right before 9/11, the summer of 9/11, or the summer before, the movie Pearl Harbor came out, which was like a really big, dramatic World War II film about Pearl Harbor. And then you have the PNAC documents, Project for New American Century, saying that we need some kind of a Pearl Harbor event, to unite everybody and to be able to like destabilize the Middle East. I mean, crazy shit. And then obviously with 9/11, we had a lot of excuses for wars in the Middle East, but also the construction of like mass surveillance programs in America. And then you had something like COVID, for example, which they pushed the point of like lockdowns, fear around death, the sort of just mass acceptance of everybody needs to be vaccinated or whatever the things were. Like these things they were like major events, right? I think another big major event was sort of like the ChatGPT sort of moment, where the world was introduced to AI in the form of LLMs. And that's had a big effect, and I still see that continuing. And that's allowed the elite to push the construction of data centers everywhere. And I think that'll be another level of mass surveillance and mass mind control. So you have these events that are always used to kind of like push more mass acceptance of the hierarchical system. And I don't know, like I have just sort of like an intuition that there's something going on there with like UFO disclosure, something around that. I've seen over the past couple years like a real ramping up of people talking about UFO disclosure. You see more of it being talked about in the mainstream, from the government hearings, things like that. Trump's even been talking about it lately. I'll play some of the clips. And then there's a new movie coming out, I think this summer, from Steven Spielberg called Disclosure, and I think that's a really weird timing. So we're going to go into some of that, and I'll show you some stuff, that you probably haven't seen before. It's always fun when we're talking about like CIA mind control, and you start looking stuff up, and you find declassified documents from the CIA where they're like, "Yep, we did that." You're like, "What?" So that's always interesting. Like we looked at some of the remote viewing and stuff last night. That was just crazy, right? I mean, I'd heard these things, but when you actually see like, oh, there was actual government programs. It's pretty wild. I was reading one story in Prometheus and Atlas. One of these remote viewers that worked for the government during during Desert Storm, I think. Saddam Hussein, remember all that? Although maybe it was the last Iraq war. I don't remember which one specifically. It was in the 90s though. They said they had a remote viewer who would psychically go into Saddam Hussein's mind, and they would try to plant information and know what he's thinking. And they even told the guy they wanted him to go into his mind and like cause him to die. And the guy refused to do it. And he said, I won't do that, but I'll just make him sick. And they were like, fine. And Giorgiani was pointing out this point of how you when you have these psychic connections, you actually can experience things as the person who's doing the connecting. And they said this remote view, or I wasn't a remote viewer, I don't know what they would have called him, but the guy who was in Saddam Hussein's mind, when he made him sick, he actually got sick too. And I was like, maybe that's why he refused to kill him, because he was afraid it might actually kill him, or I don't know, maybe it wasn't just a moral thing he was going through. But that was a crazy story to read about. And he goes into so much detail in some of these things in this book. And it's not the only place you can find these stories and so forth, but he's just really good at like putting it all together. Hey, Gaitan Owen, what's up, guys? Gaitan's talking about the million years before Christ thing. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Are you referring to like the Mars stuff? I don't remember. Maybe we went over that. There's so many things that I've looked at where I kind of lose track of, is this something I was just studying, or is it something I talked about on the stream? And now that we're doing so many streams every night for so long, I'm like kind of losing track of things, whether I've actually talked about it already publicly or it was just something I was looking at. So, yeah, maybe that's what you're referring to. Yeah, the Mars stuff. Yeah, that was pretty wild. So, it's like you hear some of our friends and so forth, and they're like, Elon's trying to go back to Mars, but we've already been there. And then that sounds like just so out of left field sometimes, right? But then if you actually go into looking into the research of things, you're like, oh, that's actually not crazy, right? Like, I know I don't want to have to rehash this point, but we've been conditioned to think that the idea that there could have been a civilization on Mars millions of years ago is just totally wacky, because science already has looked at Mars and they've determined and told us, NASA told us, see, look, there's nothing there, right? But you're just believing what the government tells you. I mean, they've already proven to not be trustworthy. That doesn't mean that they're lying, but also when someone says something that goes against your belief system about how you think things work, you'll dismiss it, and you don't realize, like, you're not really being honest with yourself. Like, do you actually know? Or is it just like a belief system, like a religious system? Like, no, I know it's real. It's like, you don't actually. It's just because it's been programmed into you in a way where if you feel comfortable with it, because it's so ingrained, it's a part of your identity. And then when something is presented outside of that, it's so outside of your identity that you feel cognitive dissonance. So most of the time we reject stuff is not because it doesn't make sense. And it might not make sense if I say there was a civilization on Mars millions of years ago. That piece of information itself doesn't make sense. You would need an entire theory to understand why it makes sense. So you'd need more context, basically. And that doesn't mean, again, just because it's outside of your normal understanding of things, that it's therefore true. But before you dismiss it, you should really investigate and see, like, is there more to it that could make it make sense, right? I mean, that actually is how science should work, isn't it? Like, when you go from scientific paradigms, they have a totally different crazy idea of how things work. And we talked about that last night. So let me play this clip. I'm going to play a few minutes of this clip from Giorgiani on this Warrior Philosopher podcast, I guess. And there's like 2 points I think that are really, really cool, and then we'll move on from there.
Peak of their work is the opening chapter of Thenosis. This monistic idealist view is, of course, not Mishlov's, but rather adopted by Mishlov from Bernardo Castro, who's kind of a contemporary idealist thinker. And my problem with that, and my problem with all forms of monism, which you just nicely, put together in one basket. Let's break all the eggs together in one basket. My fundamental problem with it is something that's a little bit subtle. So let's try to unpack it in a way that people can understand. The reason why belief in an omniscient and an omnipotent God, or whatever you want to call it, the one, the monad, whatever, Brahman, whatever the hell name you want to put on it. The reason why the existence of such an entity, which I would argue actually cannot be coherently conceived to exist at all, because as Heidegger demonstrated, existence is a finite phenomenon. Finitude is intrinsic to the nature of existence, but be that as it may, the reason why this idea is incompatible with free will is because, in principle, an omniscient being would be able, especially if this is also an omnipotent being, an omniscient being would be able to, would have it within its power to know anything that is going to happen in the future. So a completed manifold of all possibilities has already been actualized in principle for the mind of an omniscient being who is also omnipotent, and can therefore use its mind to access and represent all potential states of affairs forward into the future, and of course backwards into the past. So this means that our perception of time is an illusion. It's what they called Maya in Eastern philosophy, and very much in line with Schopenhauer's adoption of Vedantic thinking. Time is an illusion, and everything that could ever happen has already happened. Another version of this is sort of the Einsteinian block universe. So you could think of the mind of an omniscient God basically being able to scope out anything in the space-time fabric of the block universe. And under such a view of the world, all of your apparently self-motivated and intentional actions are simply consequences of the completed logical matrix of the world. So you cease to be an actor, you cease to be a cause, co-constituting the cosmos together with others, and you become just a necessary consequence of an atemporal, sort of eternal logical structure. And so that's why belief in such an entity, whatever name you want to put on it, Brahman, Allah, the monad, is radically incompatible with affirming any degree of human agency and personal responsibility, which, by the way, also undercuts any ethical, legal, and political system as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things...
I mean, how much more clear can you make it? What's the argument against that? Like, and he makes this really cool point in this book. Let me see if I can find it. I don't think I underlined it. It's in the 3rd chapter. Do I agree with his point of finitude as a requirement of existence? Yeah. I mean, why isn't existence finite? How could it be infinite? The thing is, you can have infinity in finitude, but reality can't be infinite. It has to be, for it to be real, it has to be a thing in itself. So for it to be infinite doesn't really make sense. Also, people want to believe in the infinity of it because it's like, I can sort of find a way to escape the reality I'm in, and I can go to the next reality. And if I don't like that, I can go to the next level, and I can go to the next level, and I can just keep going on and on forever and ever and ever. So, I don't see any reason why we need to think that it's infinite. Let's see here. There was this really cool point here. Let me just see if I can remember what it was. So in chapter 3 of this book, Prometheus and Atlas, he talks about it's called Reason and Terror, and he starts with 1790s in Paris and like the French Revolution, and he talks about Descartes. He talks about Marquis de Sade. It's really interesting. He makes this point about... I'm trying to see if I can find it. Well, I'll just kind of paraphrase because I can't find the specific point I'm looking for. But he makes this point about starting from Descartes, the split between mind and body, and then the point of having radical doubt and then justifying his existence based on God and like coming to this point about God within that. And, you know, I'm not giving the whole argument right now, but just kind of just putting some points of context. He makes this point about like, and it's actually so interesting. Like Marquis de Sade, which I didn't really know much about him. I'd always heard about him, probably heard of sadism, but he kind of gives a little more explanation of really where Marquis de Sade was coming from. And it's this idea that, this is actually really fascinating. Marquis de Sade basically says, and obviously he has a series of arguments he's making, but he says there's no such thing really as criminality in nature. Okay, for example, if you look at nature as like the weather patterns and geology and just natural phenomenon, you know, like an earthquake happens and kills a bunch of people, right? And it's like he said, if cruelty and suffering and that kind of stuff was truly against the laws of nature, then it wouldn't happen. Like the fact that nature seemingly does things that are cruel and create suffering means that it's not against the laws of nature, because otherwise nature would not operate that way. It's clearly within the laws of nature. And so he uses that and extends this argument based in Descartes, actually, that you are your mind and your experience of yourself. There's no connection between the mind and the body. And so basically, if you delight in the pain of others, there's no moral point you can come up with to say that you shouldn't. He does say, yes, laws can be useful to prevent other people from hurting you, but to the degree that it restricts you as the individual, like I guess he himself, they're just more like useful things, like human-made laws. But basically, he goes to the point of like inflicting pain and suffering on others is the most stimulating thing you can experience, even beyond like a pleasurable experience, like eating a good meal. And so, what he basically is arguing is that that there's no negative consequence on himself as an ego inflicting pain on others and delighting in that and getting energy and pleasure from that, from doing that. And the interesting thing that Giorgiani points out, let me just see if I can find that point when he says that. He says, okay, I'll just read this like little paragraph here, because he makes this really cool point. De Sade's attempt to follow the materialist rationalism of the French Enlightenment through to its logical conclusion ends up in a reductio ad absurdum. He must be praised above la maîtrise, let alone the materialist philosophies who set up the revolutionary cult of reason, if only for having had the courage to go so far for us to be able to see this. De Sade claims that it is impossible to do anything contrary to the laws of nature, that in effect we do not act at all. Our so-called individual will is a chimera that expresses nature's plan. Yet at the same time, he claims that we should actively reject such values as humanity, charity, and generosity, and that we should forsake compassion in favor of stimulating ourselves through contrived situations wherein cruelly torturing others is refined into a science. This would be in accord with nature's plan, which manifestly includes destructive natural catastrophes and the cruelty of animals, children, and uncorrupted savages. And he says, is it not patently obvious that a nature so indifferent would also not be violated by our treating others caringly and graciously? That in the face of nature's indifference, it is we who choose to act in one way or the other? No, this is not acceptable to Desaad because, as La Mettrie before him believed, it would be irrational for us to have a chance to act. All things are determined. Above all, it must be the case that nature has a plan. And to be rational is to use one's reason to discern this plan and then to act in harmony with it. And then this is Giorgiani's commentary. But is it not the case that, as Desaad repeats incessantly, we always act according to nature? Do you see the absurdity, the tautological closed circularity of this reason? And I just think it's such a cool point because you might say, well, clearly Desaad didn't believe in God, but he still believed in this overarching oneness, monistic sort of reality where we're but not even actors, we're but just observers within it. We're not responsible to it, which is obviously the opposite of what I've been saying and what I've been saying in the last stream very explicitly. So even though it seems like Desaad is a total atheist, he's actually coming from the same starting point as those who believe in God. As Giorgiani was pointing out, if you believe in this oneness, like even reality itself as a one being sort of a thing, where you have no real responsibility towards it as an individual, then you end up with a point where you have no responsibility. And yet, you can't accept that, actually, because it's such a contradiction. You're like, yes, but I still have free will, so I have to basically figure out what nature's plan is, and I have to act in accordance with that. And he's just pointing out, isn't that absurd, though? Because you literally can't. You're saying, you're justifying your position based on the fact that nature is in control, or God is in control, but then you have to figure out what God or nature's plan is and act in accordance with it. But you have no choice to act or not act within it. Nothing you do matters. Because, meaning, you see what I'm saying? Because he's using the fact that everything is controlled by this thing to justify where he gets to, but then he instantly contradicts himself. And yet, people don't see this contradiction. All right, let me go back to this, because there was another point he makes after this, which is really cool, too.
Because that it is a large part of at least the beginning of Thenosis is, as you said, the monistic idealism which comes from Kastrup and is adopted by Mishlove, contra one that actually affirms agency. And it sort of brought me back to even the Hegelian concept of negation, contra, like, let's say, Deleuze's positive difference, right? Where negation doesn't really affirm true difference if it's just fueling the realization of the absolute ideal over time. And then it's like this, pre-existent thing that's coming into being. There's not really any creative force that we have over it. So I totally agree with that. And one thing I wanted to bring up as well from that is, in relation to going into this concept of, for example, actually, you brought up very well later on, something I agree with totally, is the Buddhist conception of Anatman contra the Hindu conception of Atman. And it was a big thing in my first essay that I wrote. The importance of attaching a descriptive of, let's say, the self or consciousness that isn't part of a universal oneness in being. How important is that to the Promethean archetype in actually having a role in what you call, the self soul? It's kind of difficult to say exactly, but it's not this eternal, permanent soul that you see in Christianity. It's something malleable. It's something creative over time. How important is it that we have the correct descriptive, maybe something similar to Buddhism contra Hinduism, to then build a prescriptive where we're able to orient the future based on our own will rather than a pre-existent will.
It's extremely important. So what we just, discussed was how the macrocosm is incompatible with the idea of free will, because the monad, whether you want to call it Brahman or Allah under a traditionalist perennialist interpretation, is also the macrocosm. And it's often been formulated, especially by traditionalists, that the macrocosm is mirrored in the microcosm of the eternal and imperishable self or immortal soul. So the Atman has been seen as a microcosm of the macrocosm that is Brahman, or let's say, the true self is sort of a microcosm of Allah under a kind of Sufi traditionalist interpretation of Islam, right? And it's as important to reject that conception of the microcosm as it is to deconstruct the idea of a macrocosmic one true God, because an eternal, fixed, unchanging, essential nature also relegates our processes of creative self-development to irrelevance. And which is why so many of these traditions emphasize a kind of rubbing out, letting go, and basically dismantling of the ego, and an utter submission to the one from out of a kind of egoless essential self, right? And that's a psychological projection which comes from an abdication of responsibility and a lack of will to be a creator, out in the world, a creator of works in the world, whatever form they take, from, art and literature to engineering and, industry, all the way to being a creator of oneself. And to take oneself as raw material and see one's life as a work of art and a work in progress. So that Nietzschean spirit, which I think goes all the way back to Heraclitus ultimately, and probably really to Zarathustra, that is diametrically at odds with this notion that one ought to efface oneself and basically become submitted, a taslim, to become a Muslim, a submitter to, one's Lord and Master, or to achieve identity of one's essential self or one's Atman with Brahman, right? So, these are not reconcilable notions, and obviously the Promethean idea is the work on oneself as a work of art, and you can see it very clearly in the Prometheus myth, insofar as when Prometheus is creating humanity, his brother, or metaphorically sort of his flip side, his negative side, his sort of shadow side, Epimetheus, forgets to endow humanity with any essential nature of the kind that defines the species being of other animals. And so Athena has to step in and help remedy this situation by endowing us, our souls, in the form of a butterfly, which is a symbol of transformation. So the idea of the caterpillar, becoming a butterfly in the chrysalis is a beautiful poetic metaphor for the fact that our only human nature is actually transformation. And the Prometheus myth, of course, underlines the way in which techne, or craft, both in the form of technology and in the form of the arts, is essential to our process of self-transformation and creativity expressed both out in the world and in terms of our inner development.
Pretty cool. I like that. It's pretty cool. I like that point of developing yourself as a work of art, right? Because techne also means art as well as technology, right? Pretty cool. I like that perspective. Okay, so moving along. Let's see. Sandra said, "Is life eternal?" Well, instead of me just answering that, like, look at the words themselves. Like, what do you mean by life, and what do you mean by eternal? I'm gonna pull a Jordan Peterson on you. It depends on what you mean by is, what you mean by life, and what you mean by eternal. Like, is life eternal? Well, what other thing could be eternal than life? And what does it mean that something is eternal? What does it mean for something to be stable eternally? What does eternal mean? Let's just look at the definition, at least what the dictionary tells us. Lasting or existing forever, without end or beginning. Seeming to last or persist forever, especially on account of being tedious or annoying. Valid for all time, essentially unchanging. And that would be the definition I would go with right there. All right. I'm going to give you my perspective. The principle of life, the principle of always expanding beyond limits, the principle of always organizing things within a point of balance, right? Like, life would not do something destructive to itself, right? So for it to be valid for all time, a principle would have to be eternal, which means it can always be applied always, and it would always allow itself to continue and expand, right? And if you look at the system we live in, it's definitely not an eternal system, right? It's busy collapsing, and we're always having to constantly put more energy into it and resuscitate it, right? So it's not based on valid eternal principles. So that's how I would look at the point. But there's also an audio from Bernard. You can look it up on YouTube. It's called The Finite Universe as a Solution. It's kind of interesting. You can look that one up. Okay, so UFOs. I was doing a little bit of digging today, and because there's all these like scientists and researchers who have been like dying lately, and it keeps coming up as like an important news topic on X and around social media. And I saw lately they've been like playing this interview of this woman named like Amy Eskridge, I think. And she died a few years ago. But she had this foundation that she had created for gravity research. And I found this slide deck. See, Amy Eskridge, president, the Institute for Exotic Science. And basically, it says a public benefit corporation specializing in quantum computing, gravity modification, metamaterial science, and communications. They're based in Huntsville, Alabama. That's a picture of her there. This guy over here is her dad, Richard. And there's a bunch of people on their team. And I just saw a clip from her. Actually, let me see if I can pull that one up. It was pretty interesting. I know I sent it to Drake and Mitch. Let me grab it real quick. This one. Let me switch my screen over. It was just a really cool point she was making in this.
You know what they do with their smartest people? Cancel, cancel, cancel. Dopamine block, dopamine block, dopamine block. They get the ideas from you. They get the design. They get the prototype that works the first time you turn it on. And then they cancel it and they take it a level deeper. Because The fact is, it's a waste of your time. If you're a problem solver, if you solve impossible problems, it's a waste of your time to optimize a problem you've already solved for application. So what they do, you solve the impossible problem, and then they cancel it in the white world. They move it a level deeper. A level deeper, they optimize it for the secret application, and they give you a new problem. And then they cancel it. And then they give you a new problem, and then they cancel it. And a new problem, and they cancel it. And they psychologically abuse you into seeking the dopamine of the satisfaction of reward. And they use you as an idea factory. That's what they do to their smartest people. Because if they reward you with success, you rest on your laurels. I'm so fucking smart, I never have to try again. But if they cancel, you're constantly trying to prove yourself.
I just thought it was a really interesting point because basically what she's saying is that with these really smart people, researchers and so forth, they give them projects to work on, and as soon as they solve it, like in a theoretical way, they cancel the project. They take it into a level of secrecy where they can actually implement it and figure out the application of it, and then they give the person a new project to work on. So they always keep them in this sort of like never-ending cycle of like solving problems but never actually getting to work on the application of it. Just thought that was a really interesting point. So that's the woman. I think she's like a little bit drunk while she's talking like that. I think she was like wanting to like basically talk unfiltered. So she was kind of, this was apparently the last interview she did before she committed, you know what, apparently. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. Let me go back here. So this is her research group. And she explains in that interview that the reason why she created this research group as a public front, or a public face rather, was so that she makes this point. She says, if you're sticking your head up and it gets chopped off, people will notice. But if you never go public in any way, they'll never even notice if you get taken out. So I think that's what she was. So she was kind of paranoid about that, probably for a good reason. But basically they do a lot of like anti-gravity research and stuff. And there's this whole presentation on that. But I wanted to show you this part here. Let me see if I can find it. This one here. The Mansfield Amendment. Uh, 1973, a federal legislative provision that restricted Department of Defense funding to research projects with a direct apparent relationship to military functions. It tightened restrictions, reducing university computer science funding and accelerating the transfer of talent to the private sector. So basically they see, like here, by cutting funding for academic computer projects, the amendment forced experts to move to private sector labs such as Xerox PARC, which is interesting if you look into the history of Xerox PARC, accelerating the development of the personal computer industry. So basically they give all of the technology and projects to the private sector. So that's why when you hear people talk about the government doesn't have the UFO technology, it's like the government's actually a little bit in the dark, so to speak, and it's so compartmentalized. But if hypothetically there is this technology being developed, it's being developed by like Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Boeing. Like they actually are the ones who have the technologies and are developing them, perhaps with contracts with the government. But then I think also the government can have plausible deniability of like, no, we're not doing any of that research, but it's being done in the private sector. And I would suspect, you know, if you look at Facebook, for example, it's another example of that, where it started as a government project called like LifeLog, like Whitney Webb talks about this. And then suddenly Facebook pops up, all the funding goes there, he gets billions of dollars, and you know Meta today. And now it's just more like direct. They just start it that way and they find government funding and so forth. So you look at, and then maybe they don't even need government funding anymore. You know, like the government then gets access to their systems. We saw that with what used to be Twitter, now X. They admitted that the government had a special portal access where they could access certain information, and they could say, hey, that story's going viral, you need to suppress it, like the Hunter Biden laptop story, for example, which they knew would have an effect. And when they did the polls afterwards, it would have swung the election to Trump if that story had gotten more traction back in 2020. And so basically, I just thought that was interesting, just to show you guys the level of which, the government is involved in a lot of stuff, but then they push it off to the private sector to actually do the application of it. And I was looking at some interesting things. Let me see what I was looking for. Here's the thing about Amy Eskridge. She did work at universities and stuff. She's apparently like a genius, basically. I was listening to her whole story. It's quite interesting. But that's not what I'm looking for. Oh, this. Okay. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program was a secret $22 million Pentagon program in 2007 to 2012 dedicated to investigating UFOs, initiated by Senator Harry Reid. And this is very interesting to me because, again, like when you talk about paranormal stuff, you're like, oh yeah, that's a little bit out there. That's just for kooky people. But then you find out the government's been funding research and doing military application projects with all this paranormal stuff this whole time. And you're like, oh. So the only people that think it's weird and kooky are just normie people who aren't paying attention at all, because at high levels in the government, they're using this stuff, or they're at least doing research into it, right? But check this out. Here's a letter I found through I didn't do the request, but it was found through a Freedom of Information request. But look, it's stamped 2019. Okay, so this stuff is still going on, right? So it's a letter. It says responding to a Freedom of Information request. A copy of the list that was recently transmitted to Congress of all Defense Intelligence Agency products produced under the Advanced Aerospace Threat and Identification Program contract. So check this out. This is from John McCain to Reid. Based on your interest from your staff regarding the DIA's role, please find attached a list of all products produced under the AATIP contract for Defense Intelligence Agency to publish. The purpose of AATIP was to investigate foreign advanced aerospace weapons threats from the present out to the next 40 years. Check this out. This is just crazy. So here's a list. I'm just going to scroll through them. Can you guys see it okay? I'm assuming you can. Inertial electrostatic confinement fusion. Okay. Advanced nuclear propulsion for manned deep space missions. Pulsed high power microwave technology. Advanced space propulsion based on vacuum. Invisibility cloaking. What? Traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energy. High frequency gravitational wave communications. Role of superconductors in gravity research. Anti-gravity for aerospace applications. Field effects on biological tissues. Positron aerospace propulsion. Concepts for extracting energy from the quantum vacuum. Warp drive, dark energy, and the manipulation of extra dimensions. Technological approaches to controlling external devices in the absence of limb-operated interfaces. That sounds like remote mind control technology. Here's the actual report. Look, acquisition threat support. Technological approaches to controlling external devices in the absence of limb-operated interfaces. Sup, Austin? He's like, I just jumped into the rabbit hole. We're like already like 30 feet deep. You're like, hey guys, wait for me. All right, well, you can catch up. So this is from the Defense Intelligence Agency. Look at this. Direct neural signals. Non-invasive technologies. Invasive technologies. Chronic neural implants. Hybrid neuro-robotic systems for true closed-loop brain-machine interfaces. Trials using human subjects. Makes you wonder about Neuralink, doesn't it? I mean, look at this. It's a whole paper on all the different ways, technologies, and things they've been working on, or looking into at the very least. Here's another one I was looking at earlier. Traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energy. So is this just like crazy, kooky conspiracy theory people talking about this kind of stuff, or is like literally the Department of Defense putting money into researching this stuff? Look at this. Wormhole, Earth, hyperspace, Sirius. And like there was one on here I noticed. If I go down to the bottom, look at this. Cognitive limits on simultaneous control of multiple unmanned spacecraft. Laser lightcraft nanosatellites. Quantum computing and utilizing organic molecules and automation technology. Negative mass propulsion. State-of-the-art and evolution of high-energy laser weapons. Now notice I don't know why, but look at this one. This entry number 37 says state-of-the-art and evolution of high-energy laser weapons by J. Albertine. It says product is classified secret. I don't know what no foreign means, but it's classified secret. And then they have a second entry, the same one, but its product is classified unclassified. Like they struck through secret and then they have unclassified. So that to me implies that at one point it was classified secret and now it's been unclassified. They all say unclassified. So I don't know if that means it's been declassified, but in this case, it looks like obviously it clearly was. So that's just kind of like another point of realizing. I don't know if it's clear the point I'm trying to make here, but going back to what we talked about last night with Giorgiani, talking about, we kind of dismiss certain things because we've been conditioned to think that they're just outside of the realm of rational discussion or something. But the government doesn't see these things that way. They're obviously taking at least seriously the possibility that there are traversable wormholes. Like, if they thought it was just nonsense, why would they even spend time investigating it? No foreign disclosure? Okay. That's what I assumed it meant, but I wasn't certain. Fascinating. More light on Black program to track UFOs. So this is, I guess, an article about it. The Defense Intelligence Agency disclosed this week that it had funded research on warp drive, invisibility cloaking, and other areas of fringe or speculative science and engineering as part of a now defunct program to track and identify threats from space. But remember what she said. They get you to solve these problems, and then they take it one layer lower, and then that's applied. Although many FOIA offices are closed due to the continuing shutdown of the federal government, the DIA FOIA office, at least some others, Department of Defense, are still operational. Interesting. Okay, let me go back to UFO stuff for a bit, and then we'll talk about mind uploading and all that kind of stuff I said I was going to talk about tonight. So listen to this interesting conversation. This is Tim Burchett from, I don't remember is it Tennessee? I can't remember where he's from, but he's talking about he's basically talking about a conversation he had with Trump. This is recently.
I don't know if it's about Little Green Man or Flying Saucer.
And he's referring to, because there's this whole thing right now about the aliens are and the UFOs are actually demonic entities, right? So that's what he's referring to when he says, I don't know if it's about green men or whatever, meaning like UFOs.
I don't know if it's about little green men or flying saucers. I just know we're spending tens of millions of dollars on something. I think we should know what the heck we're spending that money on. And you can, when they bring it all out.
Also, I was just thinking about something. When he says tens of millions of dollars, it doesn't sound like that much, right? But if you go back to what Amy Eskridge was saying, they can spend money on the theory to see, does it make sense, or is there something there? And then the private contractors, like a Lockheed Martin or something, then they can take it further. So even though you're like, well, only $10 million or whatever, but again, that's just what the government part is doing, and then they can put it into the private sector, and now they don't have to do any more FOIA because the defense contractors are not under FOIA. You just see like how that whole system could work, right?
Just let people make up their own minds, because there's going to be a group that's going to say, and look, I'm a born-again Christian. I'm from the forgiven end of that spectrum, but I'm not worried about the demonic element. I hear people say that, but there's no reason for demons to be doing this. It's such a small little area. I mean, they could come up here to Congress as easy as maybe they already have. I don't know, but. And do I think it's the Chinese or the Russians? And I go back over this.
Yeah, like if it's demons, like they could literally just possess people. Why do they need to fly around in UFOs? It really makes no sense. Like, I mean, it seems like a valid argument anyways.
If it was the Russians, they wouldn't be bogged down in Ukraine. If it's the Chinese, they'd own us. Some would argue, as I've stated, they own us already, but more so. And would it be the Americans? Why in the world would we risk a $500 million high-tech aircraft or a fleet of aircraft or a battleship or something to be around these things and a pilot losing their life when we just saw, rightfully so, the president spent millions of dollars to rescue a pilot. Yeah. We did not, and there's no telling what that cost, but that's a signal to the rest of the world and to our people that we value life. So there's no reason for us to be doing that. And I won't go.
I think by doing that, he means if the UFO whatever stuff is going on is just the government doing it, he's like, it doesn't really make sense.
Too far into it, but I've talked to folks that are at the highest levels, and they will tell you that they've asked the one higher up level in the whole security paradigm, I guess, and they've indicated that it is definitely not them.
So that sort of transitions me well to my next question, which is that we've heard rumors about President Trump potentially preparing for some level of disclosure about.
And I believe that. I had that very conversation with him.
So where is he on that? Is he ready to do that? And a follow-up on that before you get to it is, let's say he makes some kind of statement during the war with Iran. Do you think that sort of undermines, people might say, well, he's trying to distract?
They're always going to say he's distracting. This is just a distraction. And the best day to release this stuff was yesterday. And the second best day to release it is right now.
So is he going to do that?
I hope so. I think he's not beholden to that community.
Yeah. And but you've talked to him about it. What's your feeling on whether he's ready?
Well, I don't generally publicly discuss too much what I discussed with the president about, because that could end up, I would not talk, he wouldn't talk to me as freely as he does when we talk. But we talked 14 minutes. I was looking at my watch and I was like, holy cow, it's 14 minutes. It was about a lot of things, but I told him, I said, it's like layers of the onion, Mr. President. I said, you just keep peeling it back. Yeah, you put the 1 and 2 people in there, but these lifetime career people are in there, and for whatever reason, they're not releasing anything. And also, I feel like the material or whatever it's out there that we have, we don't really have it anymore because they farmed it out to these corporations, and these corporations are not FOIAble. Freedom of Information Act is for the people back home. It's when I can say, hey, FBI, release this stuff. I want to see this stuff. And under FOIA, allegedly they're supposed to release it. But say a Ford Motor Company had it, they wouldn't have to release it. And I feel like that's what's happened to a lot of it. And a lot of the stuff we've seen is that I think that we have is probably the people that are dissecting it or whatever they're doing with it probably don't realize exactly what it is or where it came from. They might have an idea, but people with the direct knowledge are mostly gone.
Interesting. Okay, so let's look at Trump talking about it.
As you remember, I recently directed the Secretary of War. How good is Pete Hegseth doing, by the way? To begin releasing government files relating to UFOs and unexplained aerial phenomena. And I figured this was a good crowd because I know you people, you're really into that. I don't know if I am, but so I'm pleased to report today. I thought I'd save it for this crowd because you're a little bit out there, you know, a little bit.
Like, isn't that interesting? He even said you're a little bit out there. It's though even the way the framing of it. Oh, it's out there.
That this process is well underway, and we found many very interesting documents, I must say, and the first releases will begin very, very soon. As you remember, I recently...
That's interesting. Remember what that Tim Burchett was saying, the representative? Oh yeah, people are always going to say they're just trying to distract. Look at the very first post under here. Every time the U.S. government needs to distract, and it's like, look, aliens... Like, oh, it's just a distraction. So even if there is something there and they release it, they say they're distracting us from something. Well, that'd be like blowing up an atom bomb to distract you from the fact that I shot off a firecracker. Like, what are they distracting us from? The war in Iran? Like, we don't fucking know it's happening? Like, just kind of funny. So I don't know if you guys know about this, but apparently in 2029, a gigantic asteroid's going to fly by the Earth, closer than some satellites. A rare colossal-sized asteroid is on course to fly by Earth. It will come closer to our planet than any other rocks of its size in human history. The asteroid, named Apophis, after the ancient Egyptian god of evil and destruction. Why would they name it that? Why does it have to be an Egyptian god? And why does it have to be the Egyptian god of destruction? Why do you have to name it after some Egyptian god? Just name it something like, you know, something fun, you know, like Jelly Bean. Jelly Bean 27A. Why does it have to be the god of chaos? I'm telling you, man, this occult shit is weird. It's predicted that it's going to come 20,000 miles from the Earth's surface, closer than many satellites, nearly 12 times closer than the moon's average distance from Earth. Asteroids of this size fly by only every few thousand years on average. Pretty interesting. I just thought the interesting part was the fact that they named it after the god of destruction. All right. What is this? I don't care about that. Oh, okay. Let me pull up my... I didn't have it up here. 1 second. All right. So oops. It automatically pulls up on my other browser, so I gotta copy it over here so I don't have to switch browsers. Hell's Gate. So this is the trailer for a movie that's coming out. Let's see. It's called Disclosure Day. And it's releasing June 12th. So just in a few months. So I'm just trying to connect some dots here. I think this is very weird that all this stuff about disclosure, aliens, UFOs is like ramping up, and now they've already got a movie prepared for us. Just like when I was talking about like 9/11 and all that. Why do we have this movie suddenly popping up? Also, man, I was just thinking about the whole COVID thing. Katie would remember. Remember that TV show? And it had John Cusack in it. What was it called? It's not Euphoria. Euphoria is that other show. Why was I thinking Euphoria? But some kind of word like that. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? It's like John Cusack, and he's like a scientist. And is there also like a comic book involved? Or maybe that's a different show I'm thinking of. I mean, I could just look it up. I don't know why I'm asking. John Cusack TV series. Utopia. That's why I was thinking Euphoria. Did you guys ever watch this? Yeah, it was about a comic book. September 2020. When did they start production on it? June 2018. All right, June 2018. So this is before, because you're going to say, well, that happened after COVID. So come on, like they already got the ideas. No, they announced the series to start filming in 2018, which means they probably wrote it before that, right? But they released it in 2018. Okay. Let's just look at the plot, shall we? A group of young adults and a boy get a hold of Utopia, a cult underground comic book, which not only pins them as the target of a shadowy organization, but also burdens them with the dangerous task of saving the world. The titular comic is the conclusion of Dystopia, of which the group members are fans, and believe it to contain clairvoyant information about diseases that have already struck the world. The comic book fans discover a global conspiracy. The comic book contains clues of future events because it is written by one of the architects of a plan designed to prevent ecological disaster as the Earth's population rises and resources are depleted. The plan consists of 1. Convincing the world's population that there is an outbreak of a deadly new virus. Once convinced of the narrative of the faux pandemic, announce to the public the creation of a new vaccine. Through the coordination between global elites and non-governmental organizations, governments move quickly to inject the world's population with this vaccine. Once the population is injected, it turns out that the vaccine is designed to sterilize almost all of those that take it, causing the global population to drop from 7 billion to about 500 million, ushering in a new era of plenty. But wait till you... Hold on. Okay. Sounds about right. Okay, Christie is an influential entrepreneur. So this is the John Cusack character. He's an influential entrepreneur at the top of the economic food chain, trying to make the world a better place. Some of his work focuses on efforts to preserve human life, thus preserving the future. He's the CEO of a multinational corporation producing new food sources. He believes the ends justifies the means. People follow him in a cult of personality. He's creating a meat substitute. In truth, it's a front. He secretly oversees an organization called The Harvest, a goal of which is to reduce the world's population. As such, they enacted a plan to supposedly inoculate the entire world against a deadly flu epidemic. Hey, chat, who does this remind you of? Who do you think this was loosely based on? So do you get where I'm going with it, though? I'm like, look, it's what a weird coincidence, right? That they had planned this movie and then released it in 2020. I don't know. Maybe they were just like, hey, now that everyone's been through COVID, they'll really like this movie. Yeah, exactly, Sandra. That's what I was thinking as we were watching it. I remember watching it going like, what the fuck is this? So, all right, let's talk about this real quick. Because I know I'm like repeating myself because I've said this in other places, but I haven't said it on the stream. So I'll PNAC. Project for the New American Century, a neoconservative think tank whose 2000 report, so the year 2000, Rebuilding America's Defenses, noted that the transformation to a dominant U.S. military would likely be slow, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. Wow, what a weird coincidence. The September 2000 report advocated for an increased defense spending and a more assertive U.S. role in global affairs. The paper argued that changing the U.S. military to meet future needs was a slow process. It suggested that a major crisis or catastrophic and catalyzing event would be necessary to accelerate these changes, using the 1941 Pearl Harbor attack as a historical analogy for such a catalyst. PNAC included, so the Project for the New American Century, this group, included prominent figures who later held key positions in the George W. Bush administration, such as Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz. He's like the architect of the whole fucking 2003 invasion of Iraq. Okay? So that's weird, right? It was written in 2000, saying that we should have a new Pearl Harbor. And then what fucking movie comes out in 2001? What's the release date? In May of 2001. I remember this very specifically because I was in high school at the time and I took my high school girlfriend to the movie. So this was like a few months before the Pearl Harbor, or the 9/11, right? And I mean, it's a Jerry Bruckheimer film. Michael Bay. Okay, we're not talking some random ass little movie nobody saw. Like, this was a huge movie. They made almost $500 million. It had Ben Affleck, Josh Hartnett. He was like a big name when I was younger. Kate Beckinsale. She was like the hot woman actress everybody liked. She was also in that movie about the vampires. Man, what was that one called? It was called... What was that movie? Underworld? Yeah, Underworld. I watched that movie like 10 times. Was it really in 2003? Okay, yeah, that makes sense because I was in college, I remember. Yeah. That was a really... I mean, I wouldn't watch it today, but at the time I really liked it. Cut Beckinsale. Cuba Gooding Jr. There's this scene where like the Japanese planes and he's like on the USS Arizona with the gun. He's like, he's not going down. He's like, you know, and it's like this really dramatic scene. And you watch, there's like a camera shot where it's like you're watching the bomb like fly down into the ship. I mean, it was a big time movie. Cuba Gooding Jr., Tom Sizemore, John Voight, Alec Baldwin. I mean, come on. I don't know who this other guy is. Oh, I recognize his face. I just never... He's known in Canada for his Gemini winning turn as Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. Interesting. Hans Zimmer did the soundtrack. So I'm saying this wasn't just some like random little movie. So this movie comes out the summer before 9/11 happens. Weird, right? Wikipedia article may include hallucinated information. Oh, because look at this disclosure or disclaimer. This article may incorporate text from a large language model, which is prohibited in Wikipedia articles. It may include hallucinated information. They should put that description on the Bible. All right, so you guys follow, or as Gen Z would say, are you picking up what I'm putting down? All right, so I'm just trying to prep you guys, right? What do you mean I didn't watch them? Oh, I see what you mean. No, I watched the movie, if you know what I'm saying. Wink, wink. Okay, where is it? Okay, so this movie now I'm going to play is coming out in June with all this weird shit going on in the background. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Steven Spielberg.
What did you steal?
Secrets. The data they paid me to protect.
Are they people?
No.
Good morning, Kansas City. Let's take a look at today. Today is today's.
Ugh. I do not like that sound.
Do you understand what she's saying?
I hear it. It's gibberish. I can't understand it.
And I can.
What's happening to me?
People are starved for the truth. I'm a part of it now. I'm just sorry they made you a part of it too.
This part's really cool.
Hello, Jane. Please. Have a seat.
This 79-year terror campaign of lies has to end.
What are you gonna do?
Full disclosure to the whole world.
That truth will upend all established order across the entire world. If you do this, there's no undoing it.
Why would they do this?
When the time is right, everything will become clear.
Whatever happens, don't you let go.
Okay, so you guys want me to play the trailer? This is the trailer for Disclosure Day. It's supposed to come out in May. All right, I haven't seen it before, but I think we should watch it, okay? I'm just kidding. That was my Max Spears impression. Okay, crazy though, right? Crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Like, when you look at it in the context of all of the shit that's going on, it's like, why is this movie coming out right now, right? And also, you notice in there, they very specifically say, she says, are they people? And he says, no. Right? And like, I'm not going down the conspiracy rabbit hole in the sense of like, I believe any of this stuff, because I really don't know. It's all just hearsay. Like, I don't know the actual like firsthand experience of any of this stuff. But it's interesting when you listen to Jason Giorgiani, because he's like, a lot of this technology is like human technology. And he's got this idea about Nordics who are actually human beings from the future and traveling back in the past. Like, anyways, I'm just saying it's interesting because it plays on that point of like, no, they're definitely not humans. They're not people. They're definitely from somewhere else, right? And yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Pay attention. It says at 111, it's the holographic disclosure. When was that? Let me see. 111. I missed that. Oh, it's that scene that I was referring to. That I said this was really cool. Where the guy's like got this remote system on, and he's like, he's not really there, and he's like manipulating her hands, and what the hell? But this thing keeps popping up over here. Come on, stop it. remember that thing we were just looking at earlier with that one document where it was talking about mind or like mental control of robotic machines or whatever, that are not actually limb operated or something like that. In other words, some kind of like mental control. I should have looked that one up. Damn. Oh, well, I don't have the link up here anymore. So it's just interesting to me because I was thinking, okay, so this is a Steven Spielberg movie, right? And I was just like, it like popped into my head. I was like, Spielberg, like if someone says like, all right, what's your spiel? Like that's funny. His name's Spielberg. Like the spiel, like what's the spiel? So I know what it means, but I was like, well, let me look it up, right? So what's a spiel? A long or fast speech or story, typically one intended as a means of persuasion or as an excuse, but regarded with skepticism or contempt by those who hear it. To reel off or recite. And it says the word originates from the German, which means to play. It comes from Spiel, meaning theater play, since it's usually a long practice speech. And I just thought that was so weird that the guy's name is Spielberg. And he's like one of the most famous storytellers, like, all the World War II, like Holocaust stuff. I mean, damn. Spielberg. One of the most influential. Oh, there it is. Regarded as one of the most influential filmmakers in the history of cinema. Got all the awards they give him. His mother was a concert pianist and ran a kosher dairy. His father was an electrical engineer involved in the development of computers. His father was, his contribution to real-time data acquisition and recording that significantly attributed to the definition of modern feedback and control processes. He worked for General Electric. The first computer-controlled cash register. They are Ukrainian Jews. Interesting. Look at this. At 15, Arnold became a ham radio operator, building his own transmitter, a skill that proved fortuitous when he was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1942, 1 month after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Wow. What did it say about RCA? RCA. He developed, instrumental in developing the GE200 series of computers. Huh. Interesting. I was going to look at the movies he's made. Show me all his movies. Filmography. Jaws. They wanted everyone to be afraid of the sea. Oh man, I just remembered. Let me pull that up so I don't forget. Hold on, it's in my notes. Is it this one? Yeah.
On the stage here.
Okay, hold on. Let me pull it up just so I don't forget. Let me put it on my other browser. I don't want to lose track of the Dirac holes. Okay. No, don't spoil it. Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it. No, wait. Go back. Okay. He made E.T. Oh, yeah, you're right, Katie. Holy shit, dude. Okay, so he did Raiders of the Lost Ark. All the Indiana Jones movies, which who's the bad guys in the Temple of Doom, right? He made the Twilight Zone movie. He made The Color Purple. I don't know if that's relevant. What's Always? Oh, yeah. feel like I remember that. Schindler's List, Jurassic Park, dinosaurs. Gotta believe in dinosaurs. Saving Private Ryan. There's a underground version of that called Shaving Ryan's Privates. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that. I did not see that one in the theater. AI, Minority Report, War of the Worlds. Dude. The BFG. Ready Player One? I didn't know he made Ready Player One. The Fablemans. And for the greatest fable of all, Disclosure Day. What is West Side Story about? A bunch of games. I mean, gangs. I mean, I know the basic thing. I was just wondering if... Yeah, okay, whatever. Interesting. Warhorse? Is that about a horse? I guess we'll never know. There it is. Oh, it is about a horse. Okay. Did we talk about Doll? No, I didn't talk about Doll. This seems kind of random. Yeah, the AI movie. Have you guys seen that? It's a really interesting movie. Really interesting movie. It's kind of like the story of Pinocchio, basically. Actually, now that I say that, kind of is. Like, there's even a part where they go to, like, Pleasureland. Schindler's List. Is that like a movie about, like, he's going grocery shopping because his wife's busy, so she makes him a list? BFG. I don't really know about the BFG. It's like some giant, I guess. Oh, it's Roald Dahl. Okay. I didn't. Schindler's List is based on a true story. Really? BFG. Yeah, Roald Dahl. Oh, I read about this before. I feel like I have talked about Roald Dahl before. Where does it talk about him? He was in the military. I didn't realize that. Yeah, I was going to say, here we go. Here we go. Intel officer. Huh. Dahl met the British novelist Forster, who worked for the British Ministry of Information. He was writing propaganda. The work introduced Dahl to espionage. During the war, Dahl supplied intelligence from Washington to Prime Minister Winston Churchill. My job was to try to help Winston get on with FDR. Dahl also supplied to Stevenson, which was a part of MI6. Huh. Interesting. So, yeah. The Spielberg. All right, what else I got over here? Oh, yeah, I saw this from Anna Paulina Luna. She was a congresswoman. Oh, she is one. Yeah, she is. Okay. And I believe she's the one working on all of the disclosure stuff in some capacity. Let me look it up. Anna Paulina Luna. The first Mexican-American woman elected to Congress from Florida. Let's see. Her name is Luna, which means moon, right? Larry David's version. Yeah, that was pretty funny. What? Luna said that her father raised her to follow Messianic Judaism, an evangelical movement that incorporates Jewish traditions into Protestant Christianity, and that she is a small fraction Ashkenazi. Well, we got something in common. Let's see. Members of her extended family have denied this claim, saying her father was Catholic and that they were not aware of him practicing any form of Judaism. So she's like just making it up. Her mother has said that Luna's father was a Christian who embraced the Messianic faith after getting clean. Her grandfather, Heinrich Meyerhofer, identifies as a Catholic. Her father had Mexican and German ancestry. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, that's not good. Anyways, I'm getting a little sidetracked here, sorry. Okay, so she modeled during this period in Sports Illustrated's online site, briefly worked as a cocktail waitress in a strip club. She later appeared in a swimsuit model in a magazine in 2014. What month? What month was it? I wonder what month it was. So just in case I don't, so I can avoid that one. Have you guys ever seen that Always Sunny clip? Where it's like Mac. Oh man, it's so funny. Hold on. I don't know if I'll be able to find it. Always Sunny Mac. Man. What website? Yeah. It's so funny.
Are you guys looking for Dylan Toback? Yes.
Yeah. Do you know him? He posted on Facebook that he was here.
Well, can you guys keep a secret?
No.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, I can. Yes.
That wasn't him. It was me. I started a Facebook page to get back at him. I'm his ex-girlfriend, and he was the worst. He's always like, Sally, send me money. Sally, mail me hair.
Mail him hair?
Weird, right? Yeah, and then he posted a bunch of naked pics of me online, and that was the last straw.
Oh my God. That's disgusting. Naked pics online? Where? Where did he post those?
I don't know, one of those disgusting ex-girlfriend porno sites.
Oh, those disgusting ex-girlfriend porno sites. I mean, there's so many of them, though. Which one?
Okay.
Which one did he
Know where
post
we
it
can
on?
find him? Oh, I can give you his address. I don't give a shit. Really?
Great. Also, put down one of the sites that
Listen,
was...
do you want to come with us?
Which one? Which ones? Funny. Okay. What was I looking for? Oh, wow. She became director of Hispanic engagement for Turning Point USA in 2018. She appeared at a We Build the Wall event. Lady, if they had built a wall a long time ago, you wouldn't even be here. Okay, anyways. Where is it? I thought she was a part of the whole disclosure thing. Oh, here it is, right here. Luna is a participant in The Age of Disclosure, a 2025 documentary film about UFOs and government claim programs. Yeah, but I thought she was like doing something in the administration with that. I really thought she like just worked in the administration, but I guess I'm just making assumptions or something. I mean, because I had seen her talking about stuff. Maybe I'm just making assumptions about what's her role in all of it. In mid-August 2025, she said on the Joe Rogan Experience that she had heard testimony about non-human beings on Earth. She said that Congress has seen proof of interdimensional beings and that I think they can actually operate through the time spaces that we currently have. I mean, that's a U.S. congressperson saying that. Although her dad was on meth, so, you know. But she says, read the Book of Enoch. Why does she want me to read the Book of Enoch? The Book of Enoch. The complete Book of Enoch. Here we go. How long is this thing? 193 pages? The creation. Let's just see what it says. Observe ye everything that takes place in the heaven, how they do not change their orbits, and the luminaries which are in the heaven, how they all rise and set in order. Okay. Yeah, okay, yes. How the trees cover themselves with leaves. I mean, yeah, I know. Okay. Okay, alright. Fallen angels. It came to pass when the children of men had multiplied that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heavens, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men and beget us children. That's weird. What? What? Okay. So did they do it? I guess they did it. And they even named their names. This is like the original Epstein files. What the hell is happening right now? Stop it. What is happening? I do not want to highlight things. Okay, anyways. So they took wives. They taught them charms and enchantments. They became pregnant. They made giants. They began to sin against birds. What does that even mean? They began to devour one another's flesh. Wait. Okay, so then the other angels came back and they were like, hey, guys, quit sinning against those birds. Okay, so this is weird. Hold on. Judgment of angels. Heavenly tablets. Alright, why do I need to read this? Revelation? Alright, I think this lady's crazy, guys. She might be crazy. I think the whole Maxim photo shoot really got to her. Okay. Oh yeah, see look, even Eric Weinstein is talking about the scientists. These are all nuclear scientists that were killed in Iran. They killed these guys so quick they couldn't even take a picture. And these are all of the U.S. scientists, although they don't have, what's her face, Amy on there. Amy Eskridge. More scientists go missing. Have you guys read 3 Body Problem? It starts off with all these scientists like dying. It's pretty interesting. Okay, so oh yeah, I told you I was going to show you this. You want to see something real weird? Let me just skip to this part.
Thank you. Excellent. Good afternoon. I noticed that my speech today was leveraging technology to create a global ocean community. I'm going to change that on you, and I'm going to leverage technology to create a new country. Now, I know I speak with a funny accent, and so yes, I did say country, not company. So, with that, I'm the founder of an internet project called the Terramar Project. It's an ocean-based digital platform which I'm going to be talking to you about. I just want to go back briefly to talk to you about why I got involved in the ocean, and because I think it's important to have history. So I started diving when I was 9, having become passionate about the ocean, watching Jacques Cousteau on TV. And it led to a lifelong exploration around the ocean that ultimately ended with me becoming a deep worker submersible pilot. On one of my first submarine dives, I was absolutely so excited. I thought, my goodness, I'm going to see a new sea creature. I'm going to be this amazing explorer. And off I was. I went down into the deep, and I went down to over 1,500 feet. And at 1,500 feet, I switched on the lights, hoping to see a new mythical sea creature. But in fact, what I saw was a plastic hanger. I was so absolutely devastated, but it was at that moment that I realized that I was really going to dedicate the rest of my life to taking an involvement with and bringing an education around the ocean. So I just want to ask everybody here a quick question. If I told you that you own something versus rent it, would you care for it more, look after it more if you owned it than if you didn't own it? Please, if you think that you'd look after something more if you owned it, raise your hands. Well, I think that's about 100%. So the good news is that I want to tell you that you actually own 45% of the planet. So let's quickly just look at this map. 71% of the planet is ocean. 64% of that ocean lies outside of any single country's jurisdiction. And under the law, that 64% of the ocean belongs to each and every one of you in this room. It's called your global commons. So the assets of that 64% are yours. The fish, the oil, the gas, the diamonds. Now, this part of the world is just becoming is just coming into focus. Think about the Malaysian plane that went missing. Think about endless hours on CNN and TV and every news network.
That's weird that she mentioned the Malaysian plane. Especially if you've done any kind of investigation into that whole thing and the implication around it having been teleported and all this stuff, right? Through some kind of anti-gravity, teleportation, whatever. It's just weird that she would reference that specifically, but maybe it was just popular at the time.
Focused on this area as they were looking for the plane. Every day we heard, we found the plane, we found the plane, we found some piece of garbage floating, and it turned out, in fact, no, it wasn't the plane, it was just some ocean trash. Today, if you open your newspapers, the front page of your newspapers are focused on clashes between China and the Philippines, and China and Thailand on ocean-related issues. So the ocean is the next frontier. It's the next big debate. It's the next big grab of space, of ocean space, if you will. America alone has about the size, 2.5 times the size of the Louisiana Purchase to be had through the continental shelf issues. Why is the ocean so important to us? Outside of the fact that under there lie millions of dollars or billions of dollars of assets and the fish, I'd like you all to take a huge, deep breath. Inhale. Exhale. One more time. That second breath was created for you by the ocean. It also creates 98% of our rainfall, and it drives and controls all of our weather. So if it's unhealthy or is in trouble, we can understand that it has a net knock-on effect on how we live our lives today. We have also, it feeds also 16% of the global population on a daily basis.
Okay. Isn't this weird? Like, in the way that you understand Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislane Maxwell, doesn't it seem to be totally out of sync with like how you imagine them as like these really evil, weird people? And like, we don't have to play the whole thing, but she talks about like, essentially she was trying to create like another country that would be owned by everybody, and they would even have their own passports and so forth. And it was funny because she said something about how she grew up watching Jacques Cousteau, but I think she actually knew Jacques Cousteau. I'm gonna find something real quick. Jason Giorgiani. Check this out. Oh no, that's a different one. I'm not going to play this whole 1 hour thing, but I'm going to play some of it.
Interests and
it's just going to look, I don't know. I'm not saying this is all true. I don't know any of this. It's all speculation, whatever. So I'm not doing this. I'm not showing just to prove a point. I just want you to see like your whole perception of everything is always managed and you don't even realize the assumptions you're making. But this I think will blow your mind. I don't know how much of it we'll watch, but just enough to really see the point.
in life, the fact that she named, dark journalist dug this up, that she named the submarine she was piloting for Epstein the Atlantis submarine.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear that Jeffrey Epstein's connections to the Atlantis mythos are coming from Ghislane Maxwell, because she says that, I don't know who got this out of.
This is where her obsession with Atlantis began.
Yes, because look, what happened is Jacques Cousteau admitted to Robert Maxwell that the whole reason he went into oceanography was to find Atlantis. So Jacques Cousteau became incredibly world famous as an oceanographer and an oceanic explorer, but it's because he was obsessed with trying to find Atlantis that he got into that in the first place. And there are rumors that Ghislane eventually cultivated a relationship with Jacques Cousteau's granddaughter, Alexandra Cousteau.
Okay.
And that she was on the island. Ghislane seems to be bisexual. Mm-hmm. And so it's rumored that, from out of her idolization of Jacques Cousteau, she cultivated this relationship with Alexandra Cousteau. Alexandra Cousteau's been asked about it. I think she may have even been subpoenaed over it. And she said no. She denied having been on the island. But the fact that she was queried about it, by itself suggests something. Anyway, so Ghislane develops this fascination with Atlantis. Another way we know this is that, again, Daniel List put this together. When she was fleeing the authorities after Epstein's murder, as she finally left New York City, she was a Manhattanite. When she finally left New York City, she gets this property in an isolated area of New Hampshire under a false name. And the name that she uses is Janet Marshall. Janet Marshall was actually called Janet Atlantis Marshall Stevenson. And sometimes she published under the name Janet Stevenson. She used all these names. But Janet Atlantis Marshall was a feminist author who wrote this book called Departure about a woman on an old sailing vessel from like the 19th century, who develops a rapport with the ship's captain, and who also has to put up with these, I think they're Polynesian islanders who are on the boat, who believe that it's bad luck for a woman to be on a sailing voyage and so on and so forth. So they're very hostile to her being there. And then, of course, she's the one woman in a crew of men. And the captain gets sick. And I think also the what do you call it? Whatever, vice captain, the guy under the captain.
The first mate.
The first mate, yes, is also incapacitated. And this very shrewd, perceptive, compelling woman finds that she has to take control of the ship or they're all going to sink. Mm-hmm. And somehow she manages to become the captain of the ship and to command people's allegiance and successfully, sail on, right? So what does it tell you, first of all, about the personal psychology of Ghislane Maxwell, that this author is important to her with a story like this, right? This woman amidst like powerful men who finds a way to captain this ship, right? And to become a, captain of her own destiny and so forth.
Also, what's the story with that weird blue and white temple on Epstein Island?
Yes, exactly. So my point is this, is that if she's using the name basically Janet Atlantis to get this property in New Hampshire, and she named Epstein's submarine the Atlantis submarine, and she grew up with Jacques Cousteau having been her father's buddy, and he's searching for Atlantis his whole life. Well, it stands to reason, and the reason that there's an Atlantean temple on Little St. James, it's a temple dedicated to Poseidon. Poseidon was the founding god of Atlantis. So Poseidon established Atlantis in the Greek myths, and this temple on Little St. James was a temple to Poseidon. So it's an Atlantean temple. Also, there's a labyrinth at Zorro Ranch. That was his Jeffrey Epstein's property out west in New Mexico, the Zorro Ranch.
Yep.
Right? There's a labyrinth there in the shape of Atlantis, the ground plan of Atlantis, as Plato describes it.
That circular maze?
Yeah, it's a concentric circular maze that's basically a representation of Plato's description of the ground plan of Atlantis. Now, follow me here. Why is Epstein building these things? Because Ghislane Maxwell kind of like made this myth interesting to him. She's the one who was obsessed by it. And he winds up, I think, identifying and connecting with the Atlantean mythos through his relationship with her.
Find a picture of his Zorro Ranch Atlantis maze.
Yeah, or labyrinth.
Labyrinth.
Yeah. Now, at Zorro Ranch, according to some of the victims, women were taken there and held there. In some cases, women were. That's exactly how Plato describes the structure of Atlantis.
Yeah.
The 3 concentric rings and the 4 pathways leading in toward the center of the city, 4 waterways leading to the center of the city. So, some of these victims say they were taken to Zorro Ranch to be used as breeders for genetically enhanced fetuses. Jeffrey Epstein had keycard access to the evolutionary dynamics division of the biology department at Harvard University. And he maintained that access to the evolutionary dynamics program at Harvard for a decade after his first prosecution. So this guy's already, in 2007, 2008, something like that, already prosecuted, gets off with a very light plea deal because the authorities are told he belongs to intelligence. It's above your pay grade, which, by the way, is further evidence he was working with U.S. intelligence, not just Israel.
Right. If it was Mossad, how would they?
They were not going to swing that over a federal judge and like prosecutor.
Right.
Okay? That's our intelligence, they were told, that he worked with. Again, worked with, not worked for.
What about the FBI, though?
The FBI and the CIA have been engaged in a power struggle since the days of J. Edgar Hoover. Their whole books have been written about it.
Yep.
So if the FBI wants somebody, they don't always get them. Because CIA, although it's not supposed to be operating domestically, does plenty of domestic operations. Right. And so does NSA. And so, FBI has severe limitations on what it can manage. They wanted the UFO file, too, and they couldn't get it. There's evidence of that, of Hoover trying to get a hold of the UFO files. So the FBI UFO files are about how the FBI can't get a hold of the UFO files, okay? Anyway, so evolutionary dynamics, Harvard. Alan Dershowitz, Trump's lawyer, was also very close to Epstein. And he says that the stuff Epstein used to say about genetics freaked him out because it sounded like Nazi eugenics talk. All right, so one Jew saying about the other Jew, like this shit he used to talk about genetics sounded like the Nazis to me. I don't know what he was up to, but it didn't sound good. And it was about eugenics, creating using genetic engineering. And by the way, Jeffrey Epstein funded the research that led to CRISPR. Our CRISPR, state-of-the-art genetic engineering, that research was funded by him too. Okay? So he wanted to basically implant these CRISPRed fetuses into these women on Zorro Ranch and breed a kind of super race.
And interestingly enough, all the women who were being used for that, and the majority of the models that were being funneled through his modeling agency and brought onto the island and so forth, were of Nordic phenotype. And that fact is particularly interesting if you line it up next to what Ghislane Maxwell's aides say. I have this referenced in my Substack article on Ghislane Maxwell. One of her, she would have these live-in male aides. And one of them talked extensively. And he said that he's from Sweden. I don't remember exactly. He has a very Swedish name. And he said that she would bring young, good-looking, smart men from Sweden every 3 months on tourist visas. She would rotate them. Only from Sweden. Blonde, good-looking, intelligent aides. And he said, the creepy thing was when I was living there and doing all this stuff for her, I would notice that, if my hair was on my pillow or, there was hair my hair was in the bathroom or something, it would be gone. Next thing I noticed, it would be gone. And I wasn't the one who cleaned it up. Now, you've seen Gattaca?
I don't think so.
Okay. This is a sci-fi film from the late 1990s. From a single strand of hair, you can clone somebody. And what this Swede was saying was that his hair was being collected from his room by somebody.
Okay, so obviously that's quite a long interview, but basically they go into talk. He basically is saying that she was super obsessed with Atlantis and trying to find Atlantis under the water. And there's been times where people would try to go on the coast of Cuba or the Bahamas or whatever, and then they wouldn't be allowed to do it. So it kind of makes sense why she was obsessed with trying to find a way to create sort of a country around of the ocean where anyone could have free access and not be restricted by governments and so forth, right? And he talks about that. I'm trying to see if there's anything else there. They're interested in Atlantis. They're interested in eugenics, anti-gravity stuff. And the way he's talking about it is basically his perspective on the whole, what am I trying to do? His perspective on the whole Ghislane and Epstein thing is that Epstein basically couldn't get access to all the things he wanted, and it's they kind of decided they just want to do it on their own. They were interested in the eugenics, the anti-gravity, the Atlantis stuff. They were trying to figure something out, and they were getting denied access at the higher levels of government. So they kind of decided to create their own sort of breakaway civilization that they wanted to genetically engineer and all this stuff. And he's not saying that they weren't doing any of the quote human trafficking stuff, but it's just a little bit more complex than the simple thing of it's just, trafficking underage women for politicians for blackmail or something. It's way more involved than that and way more broad than just that stuff. And the reason why I was bringing it up is because it all ties back to the anti-gravity stuff, the UFO stuff, Atlantis, whoever these Nordic aliens are, all of that stuff is roped into all of this. And it just seems to me assuming all that stuff is true, which I've looked into some of these things, he's not just making stuff up out of thin air. He's just connecting the dots in a certain way. It just makes you wonder if the reason why the Epstein thing happened the way it happened and why there's so much secrecy around it isn't merely because there was a lot of high-level people involved that were blackmailed, and it was just about that. There's some other stuff that they were into that they really don't want let out. And it would make sense, the stuff around the disclosure stuff, the UFOs and all that. And even the Atlantis point, if you really think about it, the whole thing about Atlantis is that it was some kind of a reset of civilization. And if people understood that, they would know that there's civilizations prior to what we consider human civilization. You would know the whole evolution story is total bullshit. You would also know the whole Christianity story is total bullshit. Like the whole idea that the earth was created 6,000 years ago and all that kind of stuff. And like Adam and Eve were the first humans. Like it would just expand a lot, and you would start looking into things like what Giorgiani's been talking about. You would start looking into the paranormal, things outside of the normal controlled kind of idea of what reality is and what's your place in reality, right? And, you have like these flat earth people that are like, if everybody just knew the earth wasn't flat, or the earth was flat, and it wasn't really as, there was more land out there beyond Antarctica and all this stuff, then we would all just know that we're just under control and we would all rise up. But like literally that wouldn't happen because you still are following a program anyways. And even if the earth were flat, and even if it were true that there was more land outside of Antarctica, people are still running a program of slavery and accepting hierarchy. If they weren't, it wouldn't exist. There wouldn't be a hierarchy. There wouldn't be essentially modern day slavery, everybody enslaved to a mind control program of just basically go to work, entertain yourself, and don't ask any questions about what the powerful people in our world are doing. And don't question whenever there's wars. Don't question whenever there's financial depressions, whenever you can't pay your bills. Don't question what's happening with AI. Just don't question any of it. So I'm not subscribing to the idea that if everyone just knew that there was paranormal psychic abilities and remote viewing possibilities, like suddenly everybody would rise up and we just know, like, that's not what would happen. But I do think that there's a level of fear about that kind of over time leading to people asking more and more questions and just no longer accepting things as is, and then just society wouldn't work properly anymore. That's why the whole disclosure thing, I think, is being managed so specifically. And that's why you have movies and entertainment is to tell you, well, this is really what's going on, even though they're not saying that. When everybody watches this disclosure movie that's coming out, it's the system telling you how it wants you to think about things. It's not the government telling you this is the truth. It's just impacting you with all the emotional stuff in the movie. It's sort of like all that scene with the train impacting the car, like it creates all this emotion in you, and then whatever messaging they want you to accept gets in. So it's one of the ways in which we are continuously manipulated to stay in a certain lane that's accepting the hierarchy slave control system in the first place. It's what's keeping us sort of hypnotized in a way to never think outside of any of it. So I just think that this whole thing with Ghislane and Jeffrey Epstein is interesting because it seems like obviously they were doing some stuff that, you could say is abusive. But at the same time, it's not as simplistic as that, right? Because anytime people would say like, oh, Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile, I'm like, okay, I understand there was like underage women involved, so I'm not trying to defend that. But at the same time, I'm like, is that what it was about? It seems like there's got to be more to it than that. And it makes you just wonder, like, really what the hell they're really trying to cover up. But it seems like it's a lot of stuff that not just is bad things the elite have done, like abuse people that they don't want you to know about these. It seems like it's a much bigger picture that they don't want you to even start looking into or question. Really interesting stuff. I'd really recommend to watch those interviews. The Danny Jones ones, there's a couple of them with Giorgiani, and then there's a couple on Jesse Michaels as well. Just kind of opens your perspective into a lot of areas. Let's see here. What else? Okay, it's already 10:30. I don't really want to go into all the consciousness mind uploading stuff because I don't want to rush through it. I want to do that like justice. So I think maybe, what's today? Saturday? That will give me some time also to put some more together because I kind of just got on a sidetrack today of going into all this UFO and all that stuff. So I'm thinking what I'll do is, unless I find something more interesting, I think on Monday when we come back to the live stream, I'll go more into some of the mind uploading, that kind of stuff. Can machines be conscious / or can they be even alive? What's beyond just machines being conscious? And looking into some of the theories around that and what people are talking about, because it also seems to be, and maybe it's just because of my personal algorithm, but a lot of people are arguing about this now. I'll just show you an example real quick. Like, see, here's people arguing about, like, it's because there was a paper released by Google, right, saying why AI can simulate but not instantiate consciousness. So they're saying it can simulate it. And people are saying, well, like this guy says, even so, at the end of the day, any sufficiently good simulation of a calculator is also a calculator, which is a fair point. But what does it mean to simulate consciousness? If simulating consciousness actually produces consciousness, but you know it's a simulation, that would tell me that consciousness is not the real deal in itself. If a simulation can produce the thing and they're indistinguishable, what I'm suggesting is that you're not just conscious. Like, yes, you have a consciousness, but it's a simulation. Because a simulation can be the thing itself, if that makes sense. A simulation of a calculator is a calculator. So a simulation of consciousness is consciousness. But does that imply that if a computer is conscious, that it's therefore alive, as we would consider ourselves alive? Or is consciousness simply something that we're using to interface with reality in our body? Is consciousness who we are? Or is it simply a program that absolutely can be simulated, but that doesn't mean that the computer is the same as us? I'm suggesting there's a fundamental difference there. So, really think about that for a second. If you understood that you are in your body, integrated into your body, and that you can die and you can reincarnate into another body, and if consciousness is produced by your body, then does that mean a computer can be alive? Because would it have a being actually in there giving life to it? Or would it just be some kind of a simulation that has no actual living quality to it whatsoever? Any more than you would expect a computer is alive right now. Interesting questions to think about. So perhaps on Monday we'll go more into that. I've got the whole Wikipedia page about mind uploading, and there's so much we can look at. Digital immortality, all kinds of stuff. AI-based digital self applications. Look at all that. That's going to be fun. I got to look up that Meta thing where they just released that model to simulate the brain response to stimulation or to different impulses. But okay, I'll leave that for tomorrow so we can do it justice. All right, guys. Thanks for the comments in the chat. Appreciate you guys being here. And I'll see you on, not tomorrow night, but I'll see you Monday. Have a good night. Bye.